Welcome back, budgeteers. Coach Nino Villa here, disciple of Christ, husband, father, and financial coach. And today on the New Money Habits podcast, I sit down with a licensed financial advisor, Bereket, Kelile, and we talk about retirement. Hey there, budgeteers. The new year is here, and you know what that means. It's time for fresh starts and new habits. If one of your goals is to get better with your money, New Money Habits has exactly what you need to kick things off right, the Payday Power Planner. This isn't just any budget tool. The Payday Power Planner is designed to work with your pay periods, not just the calendar month. Why does that matter? Because it helps you to see exactly when your money is coming in and going out. No surprises, no guesswork. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll know if you're working with a surplus or facing a deficit, so you can make informed decisions about your money. It's not just a plan, it's the clarity and control you've been looking for to start the new year strong. Make this the year you finally build new habits for financial freedom. Grab your free Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits today and take the first step toward a better financial future. Visit newmoneyhabits.com now, because this year it's time for a better plan for your money. Well, Bereket, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to have the conversation. Tell us a little bit about how you got to become a licensed financial advisor.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Nino. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm also looking forward to this conversation too. It's always fun to chat with you, and I hope it's edifying for the listeners. So my story, especially my money story, I would say it started around end of 2018, 2019. And keep in mind, I'm an econ major. I graduated with a BA in economics. But I would say before that point, I kind of knew bits and stuff here and there, about finances. I would say I was financially literate, but didn't really have much of a sense of direction of where I was going, or certainly not any kind of a coherent kind of plan. And I stumbled on Dave Ramsey on YouTube and started to follow him. I always kind of knew who he was before, but never really paid much attention. And then really started to kind of follow it a little more in earnest. And I think the reason why was because at that time, I had just discovered that FIRE movement, and I was learning a lot about it. And so I think the YouTube algorithm, God's kind of sent him my way there, and started to really kind of dive into his framework as well, and started to really kind of apply that in my own finances. And in 2019, I got married, and we started to just continue that process together with my wife, working through that. We paid off $60,000 of debt, mostly student loans there. And we were able to knock that out in a few months' time and start building and saving. And, but yeah, it was definitely a transformative kind of milestone moment in my life in terms of how I think about money, and particularly what I do, with my own money. And that, I think, also led into, for me, a career change where I began my business journey. And that also just kind of accelerated more just change in my life and now my family's life. And I can honestly say I'm somewhere where I did not expect to be when I got married. So a lot has happened in 5 or 6 years' time.
So it sounds like you had a kind of a personal experience first where, like you said, you already had awareness of financial literacy, economics, but then you got a couple of solidifying principles, helped you to get out of debt. You did that personally, and it kind of just ushered you into this next phase of things. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the added piece was how to apply this in practice. And there's this one framework I talk about. It's kind of like the app or the map app on your phone. A map just has all the information there. You can see the roads, you can see towns, you can see all that stuff. But then there's another layer of functionality when you plug in a destination, and now it's telling you how to get to that destination. And as you make turns, it guides you, it tells you where there are toll roads or where there are accidents. If you miss a turn, it's going to, reroute you, find a new route, give you options, which is the fastest, quickest, shortest. So I feel like personal finance is kind of like that. There's the literacy side of it, which is just the map, but then there's the map function of, okay, how do I get to this particular address? And that like adds another kind of dimension to it. And so I felt like that part of it was, kind of what I didn't have before and what I now have a clear sense of.
I love that metaphor. I love it. That is good stuff there, buddy. I'm gonna have to kind of borrow that a little bit when I'm talking to somebody about the difference between simply knowing and then navigating, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one thing to kind of know, it's a whole
Yeah.
nother to navigate it.
Yeah.
And so you help people plan for retirement, right? Like that. I mean, that's only a part of what you do, but you help people plan for retirement. Talk a little bit about um, your expertise in that area.
Yeah, people usually reach out to me. Most of my clients are listeners and fans of Ramsey and who have maybe gone through FPU or just familiar with the baby steps. And so they reach out after they've paid off their debt and they've got their emergency fund in place. And now they're looking for help with investing. And it tends to be kind of two main groups of people. One is folks who are a little older, retirement's right around the corner, and they're looking for help with planning for that transition. And the other group it tends to be kind of people who are new parents. They just bought a house, they got kids, and now they really feel like adults and like they need to start,
Mm.
they start thinking about the future, right? Because now they got kids and they're thinking, okay, well, college is going to be, coming down the road here and retirement and all that. And so they'll reach out looking for help with getting started on that investing journey and how to do that, how to get going and start building those habits. So it's kind of like a barbell of a lot of younger investors who are getting started and those who are kind of getting closer to that retirement milestone.
Yeah, and you kind of live in an interesting place where I know. So I'm not licensed. I've gone down that path of I've gotten close a couple of times to thinking like, oh, I think I'll become a licensed advisor and do it from that perspective. But knowing that 99 times out of 100 or even 9,999 times out of 10,000, you're you're when you're a licensed financial advisor, you're kind of waiting to work with people who have some real discretionary income. But as a financial coach, I work with people who are trying to get to that point, right? I'm trying to clean it
Yeah.
all up, trying to manage my income and my expenses in a way where I have surplus. I can then manage that surplus wisely to eliminate my debt and finally get to a place where I could start doing that. And you kind of live in this interesting space kind of on both sides where like you understand there's
Yeah.
the hey, I got to get it all cleaned up side, and but I need to also get started side. And so I wanted to pick your brain about somebody who might be kind of in that first phase of like I'm still cleaning things up. And I'll give you a perfect example. I have a buddy of mine who is 46 years old, just paid off his mortgage. He has zero debt, right? And he's got a couple tens of thousands of dollars socked away, but and that's going to start growing rapidly because he doesn't have um, a mortgage payment. So he reaches out to a local financial firm, and they're like, "Well, do you have 50?" And he's like, "Not quite yet, but like almost." And they're like, "Yeah, call us back when you have 50." And 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 50's low because I know there's plenty of people who are like, call me back when you have 100, when you have 200, right? Like, don't bother me for anything less than $250,000 getting invested. So I want to talk to people who are not quite there yet. Let's say they don't even have $50,000 to get invested, but they're thinking about retirement. They're thinking about like, I want to build wealth. What do you say to that person who full well is still kind of cleaning things up, but they're also looking to get some traction?
Absolutely. It's an important part that you have to get to a point where you're ready to start investing. And a big part of that is uh, cleaning up that debt. Especially if you're starting to work on that, I'm going to encourage people to keep doing that, and especially to keep building up that emergency fund, because we know that if you do have an emergency and you don't have savings stashed away, you're eventually just going to go to your nest egg to pull that money out, and that's going to set you back. And sometimes that happens to people where there are things like divorce, or maybe sending kids to college, and they don't have the money, and so and they go to their nest egg to do that. And so it's important that you do those steps in the right order, so that you can stay on track with your retirement savings. So it's not going to happen overnight, and so you need that money in there now as soon as possible, and stay in there as long as possible to keep compounding, so that you get the benefit of that exponential growth. So I would say it's definitely important to get started there. I would say ideally knock that out first, because it's money's about playing defense and offense, right? And taking care of the debt and the emergency fund is the defense side. I think of it as, because for one, cash flow is king, right? And obviously your income is how you're going to get from here to that place where you can retire, right? You got to work, trade time for money now, so that later on you have this asset that's big enough that it produces more income, or at least enough to replace your paycheck, right? And so obviously if you have a lot of debt and it's soaking up your income every paycheck, it's going to be hard to get ahead. You're just going to be on that rat wheel, just going around in circles. And of course, having the emergency fund is going to help you for those unexpected times. So yeah, definitely keep doing that and play that defense. Because I used to have this shirt, I think it was my brother's, but on the back of it, it says, offense wins games, defense wins championships.
Yep.
So we want to play good defense and offense.
Yep. I love that. What about similar, but shifting a little bit? I work with a number of younger people under the age of 30 who are not yet married, don't have kids, who are in careers, so they're making decent money, and but with that, the cost of living is crazy, and all these different things, and so I have a lot of them who are like, I would love to be contributing to retirement or doing these things to kind of build wealth, but like I can barely make rent and the car payment and put food on the table. And so like, yeah, that all sounds great when I get a raise or sometime later on. And and other than maybe a car, I'm not even talking about people with like consumer debt, like no student loans, no credit cards, maybe a car loan, and they still feel like, I don't know that I can get there yet. What do you say to that person who says, all sounds good, I'll get to it someday? Hey there, budgeteers. Good news can only be good news if there's bad news. So what's the bad news? The bad news is you and I have a deadly disease called sin, and this disease causes us to rebel and disobey God. See, God is holy, righteous, and just, and he cannot be in the presence of sin. So this horrible disease of ours separates us from the God who created us. And the bad news gets worse. There isn't anything you or I can do to make ourselves right with God. We are dead in our sins and on our way to an eternity separated from God. But that's not God's will for us. See, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. God did what only God could do. He made a way for us to be reconciled to him through Jesus Christ. Jesus came into the world to save sinners like you and me. While we were still sinners, storing up God's anger against us for our rebellion and disobedience, Christ died for us. Jesus took the punishment that you and I deserve and have earned. Jesus is the substitute for your punishment and mine. Now, isn't that some good news? The word gospel means good news. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that you and I broke God's law and Jesus paid the fine. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus, we get to experience God's grace and mercy. Our gratitude should turn us from our rebellious and disobedient sin toward God, seeking after Him and His righteousness. When we do, God gives us a new heart and a new mind. Praise God for His goodness, and remember, God loves, humans sin, Jesus saves.
It's and I know I live here in Northern California, so the Bay Area is not too far away. I know a lot of people that live down there in the Bay Area, relatives and friends, and it is. I mean, we're talking $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for studio apartments, $10 gas. I mean, $20 lunches. At work. So it's. And yeah, it's definitely not conducive to a lifestyle there. And so much of this is kind of personal, right? So depending on the person I'm talking to, but I would say you want to think about, what track you're on, and where's your career headed, and there might be some big decisions you have to make about, maybe this is just a phase of life where, hey, you're living single and you can kind of get by, living in an expensive urban area, and maybe later in life, like as we were talking about earlier, you might find yourself in a different stage with a family and living somewhere else. But I think a lot of that, though, too, starts with stories that we're always telling ourselves in our heads, and it's something that's on repeat, and so that's always a good place to start. I think in general, I can say that everyone should start there and ask themselves, what story do I tell myself? And what state of mind am I in? What type of attitude am I in? Because that's going to really shape your perception of what's possible, and the range of possibilities. And so if you're convinced that, hey, I'm stuck in this place and I can't do anything about it, unfortunately, unless something changes, you're going to end up exactly where you're headed. So, so definitely start there and start to examine that and see, okay, is this really true? And start to see what the real range of possibilities are.
So what are some stories that you like in the experience that you've had with clients or whatever? What are some of those stories that younger people might be telling themselves when they're in that stage of life where their responsibilities don't go much beyond themselves?
I can almost tell without even them telling me what their age is, like if they're over or under 25, because under 25, they're just kind of out there figuring things out. And it's great. I mean, we all need to go through that stage. And it's really interesting though, hearing them talk at that phase of life, and they're figuring things out. They don't have that responsibility yet. And so thinking about the future it's just way too abstract, and it's just not real. I've heard from people as young as their late 20s who've told me they feel like they got a late start, on retirement, like a late start on saving. And that's definitely a story that I hear. And I've heard it from people in their 20s all the way to their 60s. So that, I think that's something that's one that a lot of people who are even listening to this probably are telling themselves now. And then there also might be that story of, hey, it's not important right now. I'll get to it later, or it's just it's not that big of a deal. And of course, however much time you give yourself to accomplish a certain task is however long it's going to take for you to do that. And so, and here's one story I used to always tell myself that I remember when I was in my 20s was, I'll spend the money, and then saving is just whatever's left over. And then I'll just save that, right? And it took me a while. It really wasn't until one time where I was sick, but not very sick. I was just kind of maybe down with a cold or so. And I remember the thought just occurred to me, gosh, at some point, like maybe in the future, but there could be a point where I'm so sick that I can't work. and all I'm going to have is whatever I've saved. And that kind of bothered me because I was like, I didn't have much saved at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when it kind of keyed in on, no, you got to make it a priority. Like, it's not going to happen by accident. You can't save after you spend. You got to set a priority and then say, okay, that's going to get taken care of first, and then everything else comes after that.
Yeah, I like that. And the story about like it's not important now is exactly the story I told myself in my 20s. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
important now. And that's why like I get really excited working with somebody under the age of 30 who starts to actually implement the things we talk
Mm-hmm.
about. And so like I have one guy who is not only contributing to his 401k, but he maxes out his Roth IRA every year. He's like 26, 27 years old. Working with another young lady who is contributing to her 401k. There's not enough to max out the Roth IRA every year, like in surplus, but like she's still contributing to one. And so just to see younger people who are building up those habits and those practices now, even when things are tight, because what they're doing too, like you used the word priority just a moment ago, they're prioritizing saving and investing at, and they know that it means a little bit of sacrifice. So maybe I can't do all the other things I wanted to do, but I can still do a lot of them. But I'm going to sacrifice some of those things so that I can do this thing over here, which is going to be important. And their future self will thank them when they're in their 40s. They'll be like, oh, thank you so much for heeding that advice when you were in your 20s, because I'm in my 40s and I'm like, man, I knew all this stuff in my 20s, but I didn't get my act together until I was in my 30s. And so, well, that's still pretty young because I know there are
Yeah.
people in their 60s who are like, at least you figured it out in your 30s. I'm in my 60s and I'm just now figuring it out. But man, I get excited for
Yeah.
people in their 20s who get it sooner rather than later.
And I'll say this especially to the guys out there too, that as someone who felt like I got married kind of late, 30s, getting
Mm.
my, like you were saying, getting your act together in the 30s, which is still fairly early. I can honestly say that to the younger guys, especially in their 20s, uh, if you really want to boost, get married and have kids.
Yeah.
I'll just say that out there. There's nothing that will catalyze you. There is just this kind of unspoken, intangible kind of burst of momentum that I think just happens. There's just some kind of like a marriage bump, that just kind of happens. And I think a big chunk of it is responsibility. And I always remember something an old boss of mine said, responsibility is a good thing. And he was kind of encouraging me to embrace it, not to run away from it.
Yep.
And I know I've seen that also from, as I was saying before, in terms of the clients that reach out to me. A lot of that is, getting married, having kids, getting a house. That's a lot of times a catalyst for them getting to think about that. But I think responsibility really just does something to really shape or sharpen our focus and help us to start to get some traction. And
Yeah.
the other big thing that I'll see from that, if it's not family, it's younger folks who are on that entrepreneur track when they're starting a business, and you also see that same drive because there is a sense of purpose there and
Mhm.
responsibility there. So I think responsibility is a really key thing there that can really help work in your favor.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit. We talked about okay, advising somebody who's younger, who's like, I'm just not there yet. I'll do it later. You know, we're challenging their line of thinking. Um, but I want to kind of shift gears to to a person who might be already contributing to retirement, and maybe they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, they've been contributing to retirement, and maybe they have some significant savings. Maybe maybe they have $500,000 or more already contributed to their 401k, or maybe they're really close to that number. And now they're freaking out because the market's freaking out. And they're like, oh, like I check in on my 401k and I just lost like, $45,000 because 10% of $450,000 would be 45 grand. And they're like, and they're freaking out. How do you calm them down? How do you help that person take a breath and get kind of focused in on what really matters? Hey there, budgeteers. It's a brand new year, and that means it's time for new habits, starting with your money. Take charge of your finances in 2025 with New Money Habits Financial Coaching. This isn't your typical financial advice. New Money Habits is all about giving you the knowledge, tools, and support to make confident money moves and build a rock solid financial foundation. Here's the deal: we're offering a free discovery session to kick off your journey to financial freedom. That's right, no strings attached. In this session, one of our expert coaches will help you to identify your financial goals and create a better plan for your money. We'll help you master your money mindset, sharpen your money management skills, and keep you accountable every step of the way. Make 2025 the year you say goodbye to financial stress and hello to the freedom you've been dreaming about. Schedule your free discovery session today and start creating the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. It's a valid point, and it's something that people get rightly concerned about, especially as you start to build up some savings. You have now some skin in the game, and it can really feel like you got a lot to lose now. And I like what one fellow advisor said. He would always mention to his clients, paraphrasing Churchill, he'd said, "This is the worst way to invest except for all the others," which is that, we know that there's going to be these ups and downs in the market, and there's really not much we can do about that in particular. But we don't have to necessarily try to control something that we can't control. But I would say that volatility, especially in this phase where you're at, when you're working towards retirement, you're accumulating, it's actually a good thing, because it helps you to, as you're putting money in the market on a regular basis, every paycheck, every month, that downturn in the market is giving you kind of a bit of a tailwind and helping you to get into the market at a lower point and get in at a discount. And the stock market's this kind of interesting experiment in human psychology, because normally on Black Fridays, people are stampeding over themselves to get into the store to take advantage of the deals. But only in the stock market do people try to run out whenever there's a sale. And so
That's another good analogy.
yeah, but it just, for whatever reason, people look at the stock market and it just gets kind of counterintuitive. And I think it's because there's probably a disconnect. And one thing that I always like to try to reiterate to my clients and anyone I talk to is that, remember, at the basic core of it, we are buying a part ownership of real businesses out there, that are selling goods and services, right? And so we are not just putting our money into a thing called the market. We are buying real businesses, and those businesses are out there every day getting that stuff out to customers and turning a profit and then sharing that back with us. And I think if you have that frame of mind, that can certainly help you stay the course through those downturns. And this is also where it's important to just remember too, that it's not something that happens overnight. This is something that takes time, and it's really important to have an investment strategy that you can stick with through the good times and especially through the bad times, the scary times. And this is where it's helpful to have someone to talk to. Don't just rely on your coworkers at work, but have someone who can talk you through it, guide you through it. Of course, in the middle of scary time in the market, this is the worst time, obviously, to figure out your investment strategy. But that's, if that's where you're starting, that's where you're starting. But talk to somebody and have them talk you through what's going on. And I think a good advisor will be there for you to have that conversation. But these are kind of some of the things to kind of think about. But also, just, I always start with empathy and just recognize, hey, I get what you're feeling here, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It doesn't feel great, but it doesn't. If you plan in advance, it doesn't have to throw you off course, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to get in the way of
Yeah.
you achieving what your goals are.
Yeah. And I think, time is always the biggest factor in that, right? When you have time to allow the market to recover, it's going to, right? We saw in my adulthood, I've seen the dip in 2000, the kind of, I don't know that we call it a crash, but from 2008 to 2012, the market took a
Definitely.
huge hit.
Yeah.
And then we saw it again in 2022. And so we're seeing it now. And it's like, but if you look back, every time it goes down, it comes back stronger. Then it goes down a little bit, but then it comes back stronger. Then it goes down a little bit and it comes back stronger. So if you have time, then let time do its job. And to your
Yeah.
point, remember that if you're contributing to a 401k out of every paycheck, let's say you're paid bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks you're contributing to your 401k and you're actually buying more ownership into these companies, you're buying it on sale. You're getting more for your money than you would have, and it's going to have an opportunity to grow. And then if you're somebody who's getting a 401k match through your employer, not only are you getting, what you're contributing, but now their contributions are helping you to purchase more of that company. And so it's not fun to look at, but when given time, these things have the opportunity to rebound and it works out. But then I want to shift gears to the person who's looking at their time horizon and they're like, yeah, but I'm 60 and I have over $1 million in my 401k and I would like to keep it that way because I'm looking like I'm on the verge of retirement.
Yeah.
What do you say to somebody who is
Yeah.
experiencing this roller coaster later on, closer to retirement?
Yeah, and this is probably one of the biggest risks when it comes to retirement planning. And there's a technical term for it. It's called sequence of returns risk. And the idea there is that we know that over a long period of time, like 20 to 30 years, that the market will average a certain rate of return, say 7 or 8%. But that's the average, right? Every year, you're never going to get that 7 or 8%. You're going to get a little more than that, or a lot more than that, or you're going to get a little less than that or a lot less than that, right? So it's bounced around in any
Mm-hmm.
given year. And just like, Steph Curry, great 3-point shooter, right? Sometimes you hit a streak where you just can't miss and the ball is just constantly just dropping in the net. And then there are going to be times where he can't make a shot no matter what he does, right? So in a sense, you can hit these streaks in the market where there are these runs where there are positive returns for several years, and then there are times where there are negative returns for a year or more. And you can go into retirement where the early part of your retirement is a lot of positive years, and then later on is negative years. But the real problem we're worried about is what happens if you start retirement with a lot of negative years and then have more positive years later. Think of like someone who retired back in 2006, 2007, before we saw that
Mm.
major kind of once in a century, drop. You don't, the downside is if we're not planning ahead for that, and that 401k becomes a 201k, as I used to say in those days, you know, you run the risk of having to go back to work because now that what you were planning on drawing out of your portfolio is not enough to cover your expenses, and so it's a real big problem hitting that downturn really early on in retirement or just before. And so the main thing that you need to think about for someone in that phase, especially if you're like within say 5 years or so of retiring, is you want to start to plan in advance for that by building up a war chest. It's kind of similar to the emergency fund concept, but the idea here is that you have a war chest of say 5 years of living expenses, give or take. And what you have there is that money's pulled out of the market and it's sitting in something a little more conservative, like bonds or cash. And that's there to hold you through so that if the market does go off a cliff, you got cash there that's been protected and set aside that you can pull from to let that money that's in the market recover and come back. And the real crucial period is those first 10 years or so of retirement, because the way the math works, if you take a big hit early on, it's really just hard to recover and come back from that. But if you can get through those first 10 years and, weather that storm, then the math is going to work really in your favor, just given the way that compounding is working over time and how much you're, withdrawing from it. But it's one of those things where we can't control what the market is going to do, but we can plan in advance for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the word plan. Right? Like, it starts with a monthly budget broken down by pay period. You got a plan for your income and your expenses, but then as you start to master those things, and now you have a surplus, and you have your fully funded peace of mind fund, and you've paid off all your debt, and it's like, oh, okay, my plan's over. Like, no, you continue planning. I sat down with a client yesterday where we are certainly within 30 days, but we might be within 7 days of paying off all of her debt. It'll be gone. Well, his and hers. It'll all be gone. And I know they've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this moment where it's going to feel like, and it's like, no. Like, yeah, I want you to exhale. I want you to feel all of that debt burden come off your shoulders. But what it doesn't mean is all of a sudden you stop planning. We will continue to do a monthly budget. We will continue to break things down by pay period. And now we're going to look at how do we manage that surplus in a way that it allows you to actually build wealth and acquire income producing assets instead of more and more liabilities, things that are just going to depreciate in value or eventually you're going to throw away. Like, how do we use some of that to actually build wealth? And it's like, at the same time, I want them to just focus on, like, let's just get through the finish line of paying off all the debt so that we can exhale, and then we can get really excited about what happens next. But it's going to take planning.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, sometimes things work so well, you just stop doing them.
Right. Right. Yeah.
This happens to me a lot in my business. Sometimes I have to remember, like, no, I got to keep doing that thing. Don't stop once you start seeing results. And getting through that debt phase, that's the hard part. But you plan because you're living with some sense of purpose, and as long as there's some kind of purpose there, you want to plan. And once you get past that milestone, that's where now it starts to get fun, because you're not just trying to dig yourself out of a hole. Now you're starting to think and dream about what kind of life you want to create. And I found that planning and dreaming just kind of feed on each other as a kind of cycle. And it helps you to just dream bigger, think bigger, and make bigger changes, create bigger breakthroughs, bigger transformations,
Yeah. That's why I love the name of your collection on our Patreon, Dream Big and Retire with Bereket. So speaking of Patreon, want to let all of our listeners know that you are one of the dozen coaches that are contributing over there on Patreon, and your collection is called Dream Big and Retire with Bereket. And so I love the stuff that you're putting out there for them. In addition to Patreon, where else can people find you, and what do you got going on? Tell the people a little bit about.
Yeah. Great place. Great question. You can certainly find me Patreon there. Reaching out to me direct. The website is Rehoboth Financial Planning. The company name is Rehoboth Financial Planning, but RehobothFP.com is the website. And you can find me there. I write an email every week about things I'm just reading or seeing or hearing in the news, things that to help with the growth and transformation, resources that I share, insights, tips, things of that nature. It's a real quick read that will hit your inbox every Friday. You can sign up for it there. You can usually reach me on LinkedIn. That's probably a good place. That's where I'm kind of active these days. And so that's shoot me a message there, a connection, and I'll likely see that there. So those are, I'd say, the kind of two main places where if you want to get in front of me, and feel free to reach out. I love getting questions and helping people, just work through that and be, there was a statistic I saw that said, I think like 4 out of 10 Americans have no one to talk to, for retirement advice. And so,
Oof.
I just want to encourage, anyone, if you feel like, you don't have anyone to talk to, you don't know, if you can talk to anybody without being, an uncomfortable kind of experience, and you just would love to just have your questions answered and get some help with that, please reach out, because I love doing that. I love answering questions and helping people just find that, sense of direction and figure out where to go next. And so, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll make sure that all of your contact information is also in the show notes, so people can go there to get connected with you. Bereket, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us today and sharing your perspective and your wealth of knowledge on how to kind of manage retirement at each stage with our listeners today. Thank you for spending the time.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation, and thank you for doing this, because these are really good conversations that people need to hear. And I think you're making this podcast kind of a beacon that will draw people who want to, it's going to really serve them in a lot of powerful ways. So I'm glad you're doing this.
Thanks. That's exactly the point, right? Is just kind of have a conversation about money, stop making money so taboo. I think we finally have kind of broken that a little bit, and people talk about it a little bit more openly. But to be able to just kind of hear like unsensationalized information about, hey, this is what you should do. This is the best kind of approach. Knowing that you're not alone, all of those things are why we do what we do. That does it for this episode of the New Money Habits Podcast. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review to help us spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money.